Hey, what is going on, guys? TheKnowee here, and welcome to this beginner's game development. I guess you can consider this a tutorial, but it's not really a tutorial. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a clone of a game. If you guys were here with me for our tutorial for beginners, you guys already have the basic idea of how to use Unity. So we're going to be picking up the pace quite a bit in these series of videos. This is going to be a series instead of, just one long video. I'm going to make this a series, and we're going to be making a clone of a game. Now, you may be asking me, well, what clone exactly are we thinking about making? Well, I hope you guys are excited. We're going to go old school. We're going to be making a brick breaker. And if you guys aren't familiar with what a brick breaker is, or like a brick breakout, it's basically you have a little paddle that you can control, and there's a little ball that and you bounce it around. You got to break all the bricks in order to win. Sound pretty cool? It's a game. It's a actually really addictive, fun game. So we're going to make a clone of a brick breaker. I hope you guys are excited. But first things first, as any good Unity game developer will, you will organize your screen. This is how I'm going to have mine. I have my hierarchy. I got my project and console over here to the left. I have my scene, game, and asset store over here, and my inspector all the way over here to the right. And nothing else. I don't need anything else for this game. No animations, none of that. So if you guys remember my tutorial series, I had animations and stuff like that going on down here. Obviously, we won't need that, but we want to have as much room as possible to make sure our brick breaker is as epic as possible. So without any further ado, let's actually make a brick breaker. But first things first, we're going to need some folders. So quickly, I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to name it prefabs. If only, oh my goodness, if only I could spell prefabs. Then we're going to make one for materials. And then we're going to make one more for scripts. Boom. So now that we have all four of our main folders created, now we're going to actually start this. So first things first, we need to go to our camera because we're going to be making a brick breaker clone. Alright, we're going to change this from a skybox to a solid color so you guys can see now that it is blue. If you guys have ever seen brick breakers, they're always black, so we're going to make it black. Okay, so this is what our game window looks like. It's just a black screen. Okay. And then we're also going to move our camera back quite a bit. Let's move it to around -40. Right, yeah, that should be fine. That should be fine. Okay? That looks pretty good. Now we're going to actually create our player, which is you. So we're going to go in here, we're going to create a cube. Alright? And we're going to reset its transform because it's in a disgusting position. So reset it to 0, 0, 0. Also, if you guys really want to, again, the directional light isn't too big of a deal. Throw it off to the side, just so it's not in the way and bugging you, okay? So now, what we're going to do is we're going to make our player. So we're going to make it a little bit bigger. So if we take a look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second like this so you guys can see kind of what it looks like. So there's our cube. We're going to make it maybe 4. 4 and 0.5. So not too big. It looks more like a player paddle now. Let's also press Control and put it more towards the bottom of the screen. Let's do -20. There we go. Looks good. And then on our camera, we can see that our player paddle is right there. Now we also need a ball. So let's make a ball. 3D object, let's make a sphere. It's quite a big sphere if you ask me. So let's reset its transform. You see how big it is compared to our wonderful little paddle here. Apparently our paddle's off center a little bit. Or it just be, is it me or does it seem off centered? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it just looks off center. It doesn't look right to me. Let's make this a little bit skinnier. Oh, you know why it doesn't look right to me? I'm a silly. We didn't need to do this one. 0. Let's make it 2.5. Not too big. There we go. That looks better. That looks a little bit better to me. Okay. Now, let's make this a little bit smaller. So like 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. That's a little too small. Let's make it 0.5. 0.5. 0.5. That's still a little small. Let's try 0.75. That's not too bad. Also, what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our camera. We're going to change the perspective from projection perspective to orthographic, right? And now what that does is it basically makes, so if you take a look over here into the scene, it basically becomes this like cube, and where it's zoomed in, we need to change the size from 5 to like 20, maybe a little bit further. Like, let's try 25. That looks good. And then that makes it so that we don't have like that shading effect going on our ball. Now we can actually make our dude a little bit fatter. Let's make him a tiny bit fatter. There we go. Okay. Quick save. Make sure you guys always are saving on your work. So now we have a cube, or I'm going to rename it quickly to player. And then I'm going to name our sphere to ball. Alright, but when I play, this ball is not going to move. It's just going to sit there. So obviously, if you guys remember from our tutorial series, how exactly do we make our ball move? We got to add a rigid body. So we're going to add a rigid body to it. So now that's going to make it so that it falls. We're going to get rid of its gravity, right? So that it is able to do that. And we're also going to change it to interpolate. So basically, as it's falling, it's going to be a little bit cleaner of a fall. It's not going to be as gross. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to make ourselves a script for our ball. So open up your script folder and create a C# script, and we're going to name it ball. Open up your C# script. If you double click it, it should bring you right to Visual Studio. So we're going to wait for that to load. Alright, and here we are. As you guys know, I've taught you the basics of your scripting, so we don't need these little things. Thank you, Unity. Anyways, I appreciate the help that you're trying to give us. So, boop, boop. And then Control S. Now we need to start defining how the ball is going to move. So we're going to create a float. Holy crap, if only I could spell. And we need to set it. So we're going to make this float. Let's see here. We're going to name it, oh, that's the wrong one, speed. And we're going to set it to around 20. Now for floats, as you guys know, if it's a decimal, like if I made this 20.5, I would have to add an F at the end of it in order to make it happy. But if it's a whole number, you don't necessarily have to add the F at the end of it. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to throw an F at the end of it, just so it makes sense. Floats will always have this imaginary F at the end of it, even if you don't need it. But if you have a decimal with floats, again, you have to put the F at the end of it so it knows it's a float. Alright. Also, whenever you're naming private variables for your scripts, name them something unique. So like, I did speed with this like little underscore going on for it. Do whatever you want to, you feel is unique for your variables. Just make sure you understand, like as you're making your code, you may need to change how it looks because, well, as you define more and more variables, you may need to change names so that they all works in sync. Alright, so now that we have our speed, we need to define our rigid body. So we're going to make a rigid body, and we're going to name it underscore rigid body. Okay, it's not going to implement yet. That's why it's grayed out on my screen. It's because it's not implemented. It's just as a reminder variable. And then we're going to also make one more thing. We're going to make a vector 3. Oh my goodness, I pressed the wrong button. Oh my goodness, vector 3. And we're going to name it velocity. So all of these things that we just defined are the speed. We are going to get access to the rigid body, and we're going to name the velocity of it later. Okay? Now, in start, we obviously need to get our rigid body, so we're going to say rigid body is equal to the get component rigid body, parentheses, and a semicolon at the end. So now we have our rigid body getting gotten. Yeah. We also need to set the rigid body velocity in start, because we need our ball to start moving. Since we don't have gravity on it, it won't initially start moving. So we're going to make rigid body velocity, and we're going to have that equal to vector 3 dot down, because we want it to go down, and we're going to multiply that by the speed. Alright, so just to make this make sense, right? So we get the rigid body, and then we set it so that it goes down by what our speed is. So it's going to start moving downwards at the speed of 20 units. Okay? But that still doesn't make it bounce. Let's go back to Unity and see how that is implied. But before anything, we need to apply our ball script to the ball. So now ball has the ball script. If we press play, boink, it goes down. Also, I don't think I need to move this. 0. It's just, to me, it looked weird. Here, let's see. Yeah, it's right in the center. Okay. Probably just because of my angle. I don't know. So, now that we have our ball moving downwards, quick save. So we have it moving downwards, but we don't have it bouncing. But that's okay, because we can now set that. We're going to add our mono behavior on collision enter. Just press tab once. If you guys remember, we are making a collision enter. Then, on our collision enter, we are going to make our ball bounce. So we're going to say rigid body dot velocity. Oh, this is the wrong rigid body. Silly me. Rigid body dot velocity. And we're going to set that equal to a vector 3. And then for this vector 3, we have all of these options, but we're going to make it reflect. Basically, what reflect does is when our ball comes in contact with the paddle, so let me use my pen here. So when our ball comes in contact with the paddle here, let's actually allow me to zoom in real quick. So there we go. That's good enough. So our ball will come in contact with the paddle, and then depending on where it comes in contact with, it's going to reflect the exact opposite direction, right? So if it's an angled surface, it'll shoot off like this way or this way, depending on how it hits, right? So if we make our paddle angled at all, it'll reflect in the direction that it hits, right? So pretend, here, let's clean that up real quick. So our ball comes down, right? Whee! And then it's going to hit a flat surface, so that means it's just going to go right back up the same direction, right? So it'll come down, hit the paddle, and then shoot right back up straight up, right? Because our paddle isn't angled at all. But if we made our paddle angled like a circle, right? So we're going to make this a circle, depending on where it hits, right? So here, let's clear that up real quick. So now we're making this a circle. That's a terrible circle, but it gets the point across, right? Depending on where our ball hits, let's say if it hits here, it's going to shoot off that way. If our ball hits around here, it's going to shoot off that way. If it hits in the middle, it might shoot like up. And that's the whole point of reflect, is making it reflect off the surface it hits, dependent on the angle it hits it at. Does that make sense? I hope so. If you guys are confused, leave a comment down below, and I'll try to explain it in a different way. So, now we got vector3.reflect. Now, in order to make this work, right, it's going to yell at us. It's like, okay, so what do we need? So we need a vector 3 and the direction, and then we need one more vector 3 of the normal. So how do we want it to reflect? Like, in what direction do we want it to reflect? And what is the normal of that reflection? Basically saying, you know, what is the normal speed in which it reflects? We want it just to be a constant speed. So we're going to say that it's going to set it to rigid body dot velocity. And then so that's how we want it to reflect. Then we're going to say the collision, right? We're going to take in the collision. So we're going to say, okay, now we're going to make the normal. So we're going to, so from the collision contacts, and that's an array. I don't know if I've explained what an array is. An array is basically the list that is created in terms of the collision contacts. So remember how I said there can always be multiple points of collision? So when our ball touches the paddle, that's a collision, and when the paddle hits the ball, that's a collision. So this collision here creates an array, It doesn't say that it creates an array, but it is an array that we can get access to. And we want to access the first collision, so when the ball hits the paddle, right? And we want to get its normal. Okay? So basically to explain this, what this code does, right? So when we have the collision, it gets the rigid body and it makes the ball reflect as dependent on where it hits in terms of the collision. And then it gets the normal of the very first collision. So basically what that says is, all right, when I hit the paddle, depending on where it hits, like where it hits it and what the angle is, I'm going to reflect in the direction that best suits it, but only once. So it's not going to like jitter or anything like that. It's basically saying, boom, reflect off in a different direction. So I hit this and I reflect. I hit this and I reflect, right? So, and that's all that code is saying. It's saying, I'm going to reflect when I hit the surface. All right. Now, we need to switch our update to a fixed update because we're making a physics update, so fixed. Might yell at me still. Let's just change that to fixed update. Here. Fixed. There we go, fixed update. Now it's happy. Okay, so now we made our update into a fixed update because we're making a physics update with the ball. Alright, now in our fixed update, we need to set the speed to always be the same. So we're going to put the rigid body dot velocity is equal to the rigid body dot velocity dot normalized, and then we're going to multiply that by the speed. So basically what this code is saying, every physics update, the velocity of our ball will always be this normalized speed, right? So as it goes down, or if it reflects, right, no matter what, it will always be at 20. Basically, that's all that code is saying. It's saying this is defining that the ball will always be moving at the speed of 20 units. Right? But we also need to store our velocity in here, because when it bounces, it might not bounce correctly. So we need to set our velocity to the rigid body dot velocity. Okay, so basically all that's saying all that's making it is saying that now that we're storing that this velocity will always be the same, we can actually make this velocity here. Actually, let's simplify our work here. Boom. So now it's saying, okay, so this is setting this, right? Then this is setting what the velocity is, right? What our velocity is the rigid body dot velocity. And then right above it, it's setting the rigid body velocity to be 20, right? So no matter what, our velocity is going to be 20. Whenever we reflect, it'll be 20. Whenever we start it, it's going to be 20, right? So basically, it's just setting the normal speed of this no matter what. No matter if it hits this, if it hits the paddle, or if it hits a wall, or anything, right? So let's try that out. Boink, and it goes off into the aether, but our ball bounces. That's pretty epic. So we've started the process of making ourselves a little brick breaker. Give yourselves a hand real quick. Alright, did you give yourselves a hand? Cool, awesome. So I'm sorry if this video seems a little rushed. I'm trying to explain it as best as I can. If you guys have any questions about anything that's going on right now, please be sure to leave a comment down below on any of the questions. If you're confused on one of the pieces of code in here, I'll try my best to explain it to you. But as I've said, I've gotten most of my bases covered, right? So we have our initial speed of the ball in which we want it to travel. We need to get the rigid body component of our ball so we can make it move. And we need to set the vector 3 so we can always have it determined as its certain velocity, so as its current movement, so no matter what. Then in start, when our game is initialized, we get the rigid body component, and then we make our ball start going down, and we're going to have it go down at the speed of 20 units, right? Then in fixed update, every fixed update, which is run about 100 at like 100 hertz, so like 100 frames a second, or every 100 frames every update. Every time we do that, we're going to get the rigid body, and we're going to set its normalized speed to 20. And then we're defining that velocity as this, right? So in this code, it's saying, so no matter what, this rigid body velocity, right, it's going to be normalized. It's setting this as a normalized speed of 20. And then we're setting this velocity to be equal to that. And then in our collision, when we have a collision, the rigid body velocity, right, so this right here, is going to be set to reflect every time you have a collision, right? And that it's going to be set to the normal velocity, which is defined as 20. So think of it like if you ever hit a wall, right? You're going to slow down. You won't like bounce off of it perfectly because we're making this like a bouncy ball. So it's going to bounce perfectly, right? So it's saying instead of it acting as if it hit a brick wall and just kind of stopping here, it's going to hit this perfectly and then reflect with just the exact same amount of speed instead of hitting it and then slowing down because it had a collision. If that makes sense. I hope that helps a little bit. I hope to clarify that just a little bit. But we're not done just yet. Let's make ourselves a level. Alright, so first things first, we're going to create an empty, and we're going to name it level. Okay? And then in our level, let's go ahead and reset the transform. We want it to be at 0, 0, 0. And then what we're going to do is quickly make a level. So we're going to make a cube. We're going to control and put it all the way over here to the side. Basically, we're going to define the walls. So let's zoom out a little bit. Right? We're going to define the walls of this. So it's at around 63. We're going to set it to 0, 0. So it's at around 63. That's where our wall's going to be. And then we're going to make this thing super big. So we're going to set it to like 50. Let's see how... Is that big enough? Oh, actually, it's just barely big enough. I think 50 is perfect, actually. So now the cool thing is we can duplicate it, cube 1, and we're going to set it to the other side. At around... So we're going to make this one minus 63. Oh, I made it minus 60, minus 63. There we go. So now we have some walls. And then we're going to make one more cube, so duplicate it. And then we're going to move it around to the... We're going to make it to the middle. But then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees on the... Nope, not on the y-axis. Whoopsies, on the x-axis. Nope, not on the x-axis either. I'm silly. On the z-axis, because we want it to be across. But it's going to be short because, well, our thing is massive, right? We're also going to define where the top of our thing is. It's like right here at 25. If you made yours just like mine, yours should basically look a lot like it. And then we need to make our y, because we're setting it on the y-axis here. That's here. We're going to make this bigger, so let's try 100. Ooh, that's still too short. Let's try 125. Oh, 127. There we go. Perfect. So if you guys are curious how it looks, so this is wall number 1 is at position 63, and its y is at 50. And then I duplicated that one, so these two are the same, right? So I'm going to quickly name these to wall. And then I'm going to name this wall 1. And then I'm going to rename this to ceiling. Okay, and then I'm going to shift click these and put them in level so that we don't have to look at it. So now we have ourselves a little level going on here, right? But we still can't control the player. I still can't move him side to side with my mouse like I want to. But our ball can't jump into the aether, and we have a little bit of a level for our ball to play around in. That is pretty cool. So I hope you guys are excited. This is only episode 1. In our next episode, we're actually going to make it so that you can control your little player paddle. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm hoping that I was able to explain everything fairly decently so you guys get a grasp on how to make your game. And I hope you guys are excited because now we have a working bounty ball. And we're going to have in the next episode a working player so you can start actually making a game, a fun working game. Because it's not too fun right now because, well, I can't participate, right? No matter how hard I try in this game window, I can't move my dude. So in our next episode, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have our player paddle move. And maybe depending on time, we'll have some extra stuff in there. Maybe we'll add our first destroyable brick. We will see though. But I hope you guys are excited. I know I am. And make sure you guys tune in to all of that. Make sure you guys subscribe so you guys don't miss anything. And after all of that is said, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.